On February 24th, 2022, 1 hour before a single Russian tank crossed into Ukraine, the real invasion had already started. Not on the ground, in orbit. A cyberattack called AcidRain quietly disabled tens of thousands of satellite internet terminals across Europe. No explosions, no warning, just silence. Exactly where military communications used to be.
Here's what most people don't realize. The war that followed wasn't only fought with soldiers and tanks. It was fought with satellites. And the outcome, more than once, came down to decisions made not by generals, but by a private company answering to one man. That man is Elon Musk. And what he decided to do next would end up redrawing a battlefield, one internet connection at a time.
To understand why that mattered, you have to go back further than 2022. Space used to be simple, in a way. During the Cold War, it was about prestige. Sputnik in 1957, Gagarin in 1961, flags, firsts, and fear. Satellites watched from a distance, quietly taking photographs, guiding missiles, listening for secrets. Powerful, yes, but separate from ordinary life.
That's not true anymore. Right now, in this moment, satellites are timing your bank transfers down to the millisecond. They're guiding cargo ships, coordinating flights, and mapping farmland. Space stopped being a distant frontier decades ago. It quietly became infrastructure, the kind nobody thinks about, until it's gone.
And it happened fast. Launch costs collapsed. Rockets that used to fly once now fly dozens of times. Companies that once seemed like science fiction started putting thousands of small satellites into orbit, one launch after another, until low Earth orbit filled up with hardware nobody was quite prepared to defend or to fight over. And that's exactly what makes it such a devastating target. So when AcidRain hit, it wasn't just an inconvenience. It was a battlefield knockout, delivered from a data center an hour before the first missile crossed the border. Ukraine's command network went dark. Coordination collapsed overnight. And within 48 hours, Ukraine's digital minister, Mykhailo Fedorov, did something almost nobody expected. He skipped the diplomats entirely and messaged Elon Musk directly, in public, on social media, asking for satellite terminals. A private company had just walked onto the battlefield of a war between nations, armed with nothing but a satellite constellation and one man's decision. For a while, it looked like a clean story. Tech billionaire saves the day. But nothing about war stays clean for long. Ukrainian forces began strapping Starlink terminals to drones and naval systems, folding civilian internet directly into combat operations. Musk grew uneasy. He geofenced Crimea, reportedly blocking a planned naval strike out of fear it could trigger a nuclear response from Moscow. Now think about that for a second. A single company, run by a single person, holding effective veto power over military operations inside an active war. Nobody voted for that. No treaty accounted for it. It just happened. Quietly. Because the technology arrived before anyone wrote the rules for it. Meanwhile, thousands of kilometers away, China was proving the same lesson in a different way. Quietly grappling a dead satellite in orbit and towing it across the sky like nothing had happened at all. Then came February 2026, and this is where things change. SpaceX rolled out strict whitelisting across Starlink, cutting off thousands of black market terminals that Russian troops had come to quietly depend on along the front. Officially, it was aimed at fraud, not at the war itself. The effect, though, was identical either way. Russian units went dark. Commanders were left working from outdated maps, blind to where Ukrainian forces actually were. 2 months later, during Ukraine's spring counteroffensive,
Ukrainian troops pushed forward on the southern front and reclaimed 10 to 12 kilometers of territory from an enemy that, in a very real sense, never saw them coming. A quiet software update, written in an office in California, ended up redrawing a border in Eastern Europe. If that unsettles you a little, it probably should. Because this isn't only a story about Ukraine or Russia or one billionaire's satellites. Every country leaning on space-based systems, including yours, is trusting a fragile, largely unregulated web of orbiting hardware to keep functioning. The 1967 treaty that governs space only bans nuclear weapons up there. Lasers, jamming, satellite-grabbing arms, cyberattacks, almost everything else is technically legal. Nobody ever closed that door.
That matters for more than soldiers. It's your card payments clearing on time, your flight landing where it's supposed to, the weather warning that reaches your phone before a storm does. It's the next decade of jobs in industries that don't even exist yet. Quietly built on top of a layer of orbiting hardware, most people will never look up and notice. So here's a real question, not a rhetorical one. What would you do if the network your country depended on for banking, navigation, and defense was one decision away from going dark, and that decision belonged to somebody else in a country you'll never visit? That question isn't hypothetical anymore. It's already happened. Twice. Wars used to end when the last soldier fell. Now, some of them quietly end when a terminal loses signal. There's no dramatic finish to this story, because it isn't finished. Somewhere above your head right now, in total silence, satellites are being positioned, tracked, and prepared for a conflict most people won't notice until it's already underway. If this look at the hidden battle above us gave you something to think about, consider subscribing. There are more stories like this one. The quiet forces shaping the world you live in, long before they ever make the headlines.